Hi, good morning. It's like 8 a.m. in Dubrovnik, and I think this is where Game of Thrones was filmed, but I'm not really sure because I don't think I watched it, or if I watched it, I don't think I paid attention to this part. So yeah, it's really pretty though. Still a bit chilly, but really nice. So, after just about a week in Germany, we got to Dubrovnik on Saturday, and this is basically the southern tip of Croatia. It's almost all the way on the border to Montenegro, and it's a beautiful old town. And we're actually celebrating my mom's birthday here because she requests for her major birthdays that all of us come together and celebrate under an olive branch, which in Europe you really only have in the Mediterranean area. So we decided on Croatia for this year. I've actually been to Croatia a couple of times, but I've never stayed in the city. We've always just gone camping out on the islands or somewhere else on the coast. And I'm surprised by how beautiful Dubrovnik is. And we got to stay in this really nice little Airbnb that's overlooking the old town with a pretty nice view. And we can see the gondola actually from our window going up to the mountain that's overlooking the city. But of course, instead of taking the gondola, we are actually gonna walk up there, which looks like it's pretty high, but it's actually only about 1,300 feet, which shouldn't be too bad, but it is pretty steep. If you look at a map of Croatia, the entire coast is kind of covered in these little islands, and on the way up to this hill, or I guess it's a mountain, you can actually see pretty far, and you can see some of those islands. And I actually got to see them as well flying in. So if you're flying into Croatia from anywhere in Northern Europe, maybe try to get a day flight so you can look down and look at this beautiful coast. It's a pretty short flight from, for example, Berlin. It's only like an hour and a half. And so Croatia has actually been a destination for German travelers specifically for a really long time, just because really it's very similar to Italy, just because it's basically the same coast, it's the other side of the same coast. And it's beautiful, the water is so beautiful and nice to swim in, but it is significantly cheaper than Italy. And so for example, we used to go for some summers, we used to come and drive our van down from Germany and camp on one of the islands. I can't really remember which islands it was, but there's basically campgrounds on almost all of the islands that are big enough, and that is a very cheap way to spend a lot of time in the water and in the sun, and I have very fond memories of going camping here over the summer. And Germans in general, but I think there's other like Northern European cultures, have a pretty different philosophy about vacations. I feel like in the US it's kind of like a very luxurious thing to do, and when you do go on vacation you kind of strive to have it be comfortable and luxurious and kind of nicer than your regular life. But Germans kind of have a different perspective on it. Maybe, I think it's probably because water, like swimmable water, and warmth and sunshine are already such a luxury good in Germany that you can just put us on a beach when the sun is shining, and we will literally sleep in a tent for 3 weeks just to get that. And so vacations are usually seen as not necessarily more comfortable or like with more amenities than your normal life, but just kind of like a necessary like change of scenery and kind of getting away from everything at home and then enjoying the sunshine. And so it sounds kind of funny sometimes when I talk to people here in America and I tell them, oh yeah, we used to spend our summers on these islands in the Mediterranean, and it sounds so extravagant, but I mostly remember a summer in which we cooked pasta on our camping stove for 3 weeks straight and took showers outdoors. But I loved it, and I still do. And I still have the approach that I would rather go somewhere interesting and sleep in the car rather than not go at all. Of course, this time staying in an Airbnb, it does feel a lot more comfortable, but I'm still happy that I don't necessarily need the comfort in order to enjoy a place. And I would definitely come back here and camp again sometime if I get the chance to. It seems that Dubrovnik in the summer can get very hot and crowded, and my mom and dad actually recommended coming here maybe in the shoulder season, which for here would be probably in September. I think by that time the water will have warmed up so much and it will still be hot and sunny, but you most likely won't have the European families here because the kids have to go back to school in September latest. Coming here in April is definitely a very interesting time because it's just before it starts getting crowded for Easter and then for early summer. But it's still pretty empty, and so I kind of try to take advantage of that and take a lot of photos in spots that are usually pretty overcrowded. It was pretty enjoyable walking around early in the morning and just kind of seeing mostly the people that actually live there, like a lot of school children going to school and people going to work. I basically had that beautiful bay that they used to film Game of Thrones. I had that all to myself in the morning just to take photos and kind of hang around. And I definitely recommend doing that when you're here, just kind of getting out before the crowds. That probably is a good thing to do anywhere you go anyways, but it felt particularly good here in Dubrovnik after hearing that my mom and dad had come here before in August, and it was so crowded that it was not super comfortable to walk around the old town, which has a lot of these beautiful little streets that are very winding and small and just not made for large crowds. The old town of Dubrovnik is one of the oldest and best preserved medieval cities in the world, or I guess in Europe. And I think the best way to look at that and experience what that really means is walking around the old walls of the town. And they were actually built, part of it was built as early as the 11th century, so they've been standing for a really long time, and it definitely looks pretty different than what I'm used to seeing. It takes just about 2 or 3 hours to walk all along the walls, basically once in a circle around the old town. And it's definitely worth to kind of take your time with it. Maybe plan even more time for this if you like photography and you like really good angles for things. The entrance fee for the city walls also includes this really beautiful fort. It's maybe like a 10-minute walk away from where you exit the city walls. This fort has also been used as a location for movies, and it's pretty obvious why. It's very beautiful and it's very noticeably clean. Especially after spending a couple days in Berlin, it's very obvious just how well kept and clean the entire old town is. As you can probably tell, I love the color of the water and just how clear and calm the Mediterranean is in this area. I would definitely love to come back sometime when it's warm enough to swim. But photographing and filming and honestly hearing the water already makes me just feel really happy to be here. Somehow everything just feels more interesting and better and more beautiful when you're constantly looking out at a large body of water. In general, I just really enjoy being by the coast and feeling an ocean breeze, and really just looking out over the water. Somehow that brings me a lot of joy. I haven't had a chance in the last 2 or 3 years to come to the southern part of Europe, and it really always is crazy to me just how different it is here than just 2 short flight hours north in Germany. The landscape, the culture, everything's so different. If you were to compare that to the US, if you fly 2 hours north from Atlanta, you would definitely still be in the US, but people will still speak the same language, and the landscape is gonna be more similar. The difference in landscape and plant life and even culture is massive if you compare Croatia to Germany. It just feels like a pretty different scale. We had a few really nice days in the city, and I'm so happy that there aren't too many restrictions anymore, and that I was able to come here from the US, and that my family could come here from Germany without too much hassle. Dubrovnik is definitely a place that I can wholeheartedly recommend to visit. And if you're already flying to Europe from the US to any of the major airports, like Paris or Frankfurt or even London, it's really cheap to fly down here. And it's such an interesting place culturally, historically, and to just enjoy yourself, honestly.
Ja, cool. Ja, richtig cool.
Oh, geil.
Wow. Leute, sauber macht Lust.
And then it was time to leave Dubrovnik. My brother and I decided that we wanted to check out the city Split before we left Croatia, and so we took a ferry directly from Dubrovnik to Split, which takes just about 4 hours, and it's a very nice, almost like a little cruise through those little islands that I was talking about earlier. It's cheap and it's a great way to see more of the landscape and kind of be able to look at those little towns and campgrounds that I was talking about earlier. Split is much less of a touristy place compared to Dubrovnik, and it feels just almost like a lot more Croatian. And of course, in the summer, there's definitely still a lot of tourism here. But in the off season, I feel like I definitely heard way less English and German and French on the street than I heard what I think is Croatian. Another noticeable difference between the two places was that in Dubrovnik we didn't even need cash because everything was done with card, and here most places didn't even accept cards. Even though Croatia is part of the EU, they don't use the euro and instead use a currency called kuna that only exists in Croatia. We got some good cheap food, and then my brother left to go spend a few days in Rome. And I spent a few days by myself here in Split. It was so nice to spend a few days with my family like this, but I definitely also like being by myself. I basically spent the entire time just sitting around and watching people. In the heart of the city, there's this huge palace that was built in the 4th century, which means that the whole complex is about 1,700 years old. That feels pretty cool to me. And if you walk past this little main square, you get to a tiny little photo store where I dropped off some film rolls to get developed. I did have some issues with my allergies and was just feeling like a little bit uncomfortable, which leads me to my number one travel essential. Always have ibuprofen on you. It can save you from having a bad experience in a cool place just because you have a minor headache. I know some people in the US who have a family connection to Croatia, and I definitely think it's worth a visit. So don't feel too intimidated to come here, even when you're by yourself. I felt very good and safe here, and I had a very good week here in Croatia.